a very special guest, somebody that, well, let's put it this way. Rick Sanchez is an Emmy Award winner who was the host of the number one, and listen to me, number one daytime show on CNN, and the first U.S. Latino to host a national newscast, Rick's List. He was canceled for a quote unquote mistake when describing the lack of diversity in the news media. As memes, tweets, and pundits piled on the damage of a few poor chosen sentences, it took only hours before Sanchez's career would come to a scorching halt at CNN. And this was before the cancel culture was in vogue. And before I ask Brother Rick to say anything, I just want to say there are many times these types of changes are blessings. And from all that I saw thereafter, blessing. Rick Sanchez, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
That's great, man. I love the way you explained that whole thing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, my mother used to say, un paso para adelante, un pasito para atrás.
Exactamente.
Un paso para adelante, un pasito, you take a step forward, son, in life, and you may have to take another one back. But you know what? Never plan to go back, not even to gather speed. So yes, sometimes things happen in our lives, and if we handle them properly, they usually make us better. I even say to people when they ask me, I say, if you haven't tripped for a while, if you haven't fallen down, ask somebody to knock your ass down, because I guarantee you it'll make you better.
Exactly. Exactly, man. That is the way one should look at all of this. Let me tell you something. I don't want to harp on that issue, but I want to it really upset me then, okay? Because I was a dedicated watcher of your show. In fact, I was one of those reporters that would call in all the time, and every now and then you'd give me a quote, give a quote that I put up on a tweet or something. I really enjoyed you were one of the first to really have a genuinely interactive show. In other words, what we cherish today. So it was great during those times of watching what you were doing, right? My question to you is, it wasn't the days of cancel culture. No. How comes your exit was so fast?
Boy, that was a really, there's no question I made a mistake, and there's no question that I was clumsy in what I was trying to say. And for those of you who don't remember, essentially at the time, I was trying to make the point that in cable news and in news in general across the United States, hell, forget cable news, media in general, movies in America, whatever, there was a lack of diversity. We saw the same people from the same place giving the same opinions all the time. And there was a sense that most of the people came from, the Ivy League set, the, Northeast. They tended to be, Anglo-Europeans. Today there are at least more African-Americans, and that's nice to see. But back then there was very few African-Americans. There were very few of anything that wasn't, the white Anglo-Saxon, for lack of a better term. And I was trying to make that point, that it was really important for the media to look beyond itself, because America is not what they were painting. That wasn't what we look like. And that in particular, Latinos, 20% of the population of the United States, should be as represented. Now, at the time, I was going through this whole thing at CNN, and some people might remember, where I was doing really, really, really great ratings. In fact, historic ratings. I was told at the time I was reaching ratings they'd never seen before at CNN. And yet every time they had an opportunity to put me in a prime time slot, they would pass on me and give it to somebody else. So to say I was a little pissed off is an understatement. So they caught me at the wrong time, and this guy's doing an interview with me. And when I start talking about diversity, somehow I foolishly started talking about Jon Stewart, who's a great guy, by the way, and a dear friend of mine, and we've talked all the time, and he was great. But at the time I said, I'm kind of angry at Jon right now because he seems to be constantly harping on me, and why doesn't he harp on others? And then the guest turned it into a conversation about Jon Stewart, and before I knew it, we were talking about Jews versus Latinos, which is a kind of a dumb conversation, and how I got myself there, who knows? And then I started saying that in the news media, Jewish Americans are not underrepresented. which is true, by the way.
Right.
Just like in Miami politics, Cubans are definitely not,
Right.
underrepresented. And in different places, you'll find that some people do very well. So, but the way I phrased it made it sound like I was criticizing Jews in general, which I wasn't, but obviously my words were wrong. So I immediately apologized. I said, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I apologized here. And I did the whole mea culpa, but it was too late. You're right. Talk about canceled within a matter of hours.
Yes, I remember.
I mean, late night television hosts were lambasting me. The every newspaper in America wrote headlines about this evil guy, and I was like, guys, I just misspoke. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
But let me interrupt there a bit, Rick, because what the reaction to what you said proved not necessarily how the words were put, but it proved exactly what you're talking about. Because there it is that you said some words that look, I'm not going.
No. I know where you're going. In fact, here, let me help you.
Yeah.
As soon as I was over, most of my really dear, really great Jewish friends, including the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League,
right,
where they immediately called me and said, "Look, we know you. You're not an anti-Semite.
Right.
You're not anti-Jewish. You just screwed up and said some things you probably shouldn't have said." And then many of them, and my buddies who are Jewish and are in the business, said, God, this is horrible, because the fact that they fired you for saying something about Jews makes it look like Jews control the media.
Exactly. Exactly.
They didn't like what you said, so they got rid of you, and that's what it's making it look like. And I'm saying, but it's not true. That's not what I'm trying to say. And they don't. But the whole thing, you're absolutely right. If you're trying to say that it ended up kind of being a reconfirmation,
that's what it was.
Unintentionally.
It was exactly that, because people go on TV and say things about a lot of folks.
Right.
And they don't lose their jobs. And not only that, Rick, and I'm going to get off this subject because we have some important things to discuss. But when you look at it from a standpoint, do you understand what it takes to take a number one show host off a station? You are willing to take a viewer hit, all this kind of stuff because of maybe 3 or 4 words. It makes no sense. Even after you come out and say, mea culpa, this is what I'm really trying to say. And then they prove a particular point. Not exactly as the words, but a particular point gets proven. But anyhow.
And by the way, maybe the final thing we should say about all of this is it in many ways, I mean, we all learn. I am highly imperfect, man. I have screwed up so much.
We all are.
Life. And part of it is because I grew up not knowing some things. So,
right.
There are some particular insensitivity points that we Latinos have that some people don't understand. And all it takes is a conversation, and then you'll understand. I say some things sometimes, and my kids say, Dad, that's racist. And I'm going, why? And then I go, oh, okay, I get it. I understand how so we're constantly all learning and molding to each other, and we're
exactly.
But we learn from it. You don't have to chop me off at the knees unless I rob a bank or molest a child. Everything else that has to do with words can be fixed with a conversation.
And in my program, that's what we do, right? I bring folks in from all directions, left, right, middle, anarchists, whatever you want to be. It's a conversation that it's what it's all about. And that's what I enjoyed about your show. You always had a conversation.
Yes.
Those were the days that I was in a coffee party, and we would, some of the topics that you'd come up with, discuss. And it's like, oh yeah. And then the other great thing about it is when you talk about diversity, you'd always throw in some Spanish every now and then. Tú sabes lo que estoy diciendo, and that kind, and it was like, wow, it was refreshing,
Yeah. We had John Klein, the president of CNN. We were up in the Time Warner building one day, and John, great guy. I love John. So John Klein calls me into his office and he says, Sanchez, I got to tell you something. I said, what, John? He goes, your show is now the highest rated non-white rated show, or you have the highest non-white ratings in the history of CNN since they founded the network. You're getting African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, young Americans to watch our channel in ways that, frankly, we've just never seen before.
Right.
And I thought, man, that's pretty cool. That was a special.
And it was so easy to let you go. It's amazing. But anyhow,
whatever.
Anyhow, let's go. Yeah. Let's go. I mean,
And by the way,
great.
we should say, we should say the reason I'm now doing Agua Media, which is where I am right now in the Agua Media studios, is because of that. Because if we don't have a good outlet, which I don't think we still do, by the way, CNN's never replaced me. There's never been they never found another Latino. So to this day, there's no primetime anchor. And, there's a couple Acosta, but he's not even an anchor. He does, he's a reporter. So, we're not still there. So we've decided to do this because there are truths. There are truths in our community as Latinos that nobody knows about. And if nobody's going to tell them, we will. And that's what we're doing here at Agua Media and the Rick Sanchez News podcast that I'm doing now.
Well, that is great. We're going to talk about that news podcast in a minute. But first of all, stereotyping of Latinos. You were you shocked them when you got to CNN in that you could actually get some ratings. How do you think Latinos are portrayed still to this day in media? And what, other than what you're doing with Agua Media and other things, what can we do to improve that situation?
Well, it's obvious. I mean, we could say that if you were to start, for example, with what we call the Fox News part of the world, the right-wing media, so to speak. Obviously, it's all about the border, and we got to stop these people from coming over here. And not only that, some of the people who are here, we got to round them up and we got to send them back because, as our former president said, they're rapists and they're criminals. And I suppose some might be good people. So those are his words. And he didn't invent those words. He got those words from watching cable news and from watching Fox News. And Fox News, in many ways, got those words from watching Hollywood's depiction of Latinos, because in movies, according to the study done by USC, 37% of the time Latinos are cast as criminals, and 32% of the time we're cast as not successful. So the idea that people have in their heads is these people are all living around the border. They're dangerous. So when you hear some, late night news person, they're not really news people because news people don't work on cable channels anymore, but whatever. Somebody who got a job reading or giving their opinions on Fox News in prime time says that if we continue to let these people in, your daughter's going to end up raped. Well, there's a genesis for that. It came from some place. And by the way, they're not the only ones who are guilty, because while what I like to call the Anderson Coopers and the Rachel Maddows of the world, the CNNs and the MSNBCs tend to patronize Latinos, and hope that they'll watch. When you really get down to it, they won't give you the numbers. They won't dispel those myths properly. They won't tell you, like I'm about to tell you right now, that Latinos in the United States are the third fastest growing GDP economy in the entire world. Yes, if Latinos in America were a country, they would be the third fastest growing GDP in the world, only behind China and India. Who knew that? Well, you know that if you watch if you listen to Rick Sanchez News or watch Rick Sanchez News. Here's another one for you. Of Latinos, 41 and under, 95% speak English. Most people think we're a bunch of beaners who barely speak English, and most of us jumped the border last week. Here's another one. 80% of Latinos are U.S. citizens. Who knew, right? These are important pieces of information. This is
not
data.
Even MSNBC gives it to you.
Yes. I mean, as we like to say, esto es importante. This is where the rubber meets the road. Knowing truths sets you free, right? It tells people Latinos are Americans. We're all in the same boat. We're not different.
Y por eso necesitamos tu canal. Por eso necesitamos tu canal. Pero it's interesting, right? Because the country, first of all, I want to bring up something, because one of the things we're to talk about is that we want to refute Latino leaders, or who are so-called Latino leaders. And here's an interesting thing. You are a journalist. Yeah. And you are putting this information out. There's a whole lot of crap out there in the news media, and everybody gets their chance in front of CNN, in front of ABC, CBS. And these things that you're articulating here, one would think that our Latino leaders would be out there hammering those particular points, right? Mm-hmm. A point like we have a recession I mean, not a recession. We have a slowdown, and some of this slowdown that we have today, they claim it's because they're having problems hiring people, finding people to work.
Right.
We have a border that is exploding with people who prove they want to work. How did they prove they want to work? Anybody who walks from Panama or from Guatemala or jump over from Cuba to get out to find a way to Mexico to then come into, that person is a worker. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if we have this shortage, you would think Latino leaders would be out there saying, hey, these guys, these GOP guys are screwing Americans because by them fighting the border as opposed to a sensible border plan, bring in the workers that we need to save inflation. I don't hear the Democrats putting that sort of message out to positivize los Latinos ahí en el borde. And by the way, it's not only Latinos in la borde, because up in Canada, we have other people coming in from Czechoslovakia, well, not more Czech and Slavic and all these other places coming in. We don't see those sensible messages coming out, Rick.
Yeah, the average
now,
Latino.
And again, I put some of that fault on themselves, on Latino leaders, just like I put certain issues on the CBC. And we have leaders that just aren't leaders anymore. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The average Latino works 2 jobs. The average Latino goes to church. The average Latino is very family oriented. The average Latino has a tendency to start jobs when they come to the United States. They're more entrepreneurial. There was a recent study that came out that said Latinos right now are starting more small businesses than any cohort in the United States. Latinos are hiring more people than any cohort in the United States. Man, this stuff's important. These metrics are important. This data is important. This can change minds, but nobody's saying any of these things except myself and maybe Gary Acosta and Saul Trujillo and yourself and the Stanford study that's recently done, the new UCLA study that just came out. The research is there. You just got to find it and tell it, but nobody seems interested in doing that because I don't know.
I'm going to say something that isn't quite, in a lot of ways, one of the reasons for, in Panama, we get, you don't have a job, you get a cart, you do some raspao and you go out and you sell it, or you make some hojaldas and, you go on the streets and you do these things. It's entrepreneurial, right?
Yes.
And that spirit, I don't know if a lot of the people in power want to highlight that spirit, because I don't know how much in America we really want a hell of a lot of independent thinkers in reality. And I wonder if a lot of this isn't just folks saying, if we give too much freedom for these new people that are coming over that are very entrepreneurial, it may not look well for the others as these people succeed. Your thoughts?
Well, I want to share an anecdote with you.
Yeah.
I want to share a story with you.
Mm-hmm.
And this story puts the whole conversation that we're having together and explains it. There's a place in the United States called Dalton, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton, Georgia is the carpet mill manufacturing center of the world.
Uh-huh.
It is where all the carpets, all the rugs are made commercially that are then sent all over the world. And this started when people started putting in carpet mills after World War II. And the soldiers who came back from World War II, who lived in that area around the Appalachians, took those jobs, worked hard, American know-how, American industrial strength, America, they did what America's famous for, digging in, getting their hands dirty and creating this unbelievable carpet mill industry led by Mohawk, which is the number one industry of, rug manufacturers in the entire world. So now, fast forward to the 1980s and 1990s. Those workers are old. They're retiring. They're dying. They obviously need workers, right?
Right.
So you think their kids want that job? No.
Nope.
They don't. Their kids want to go to Atlanta or Charleston or New York or Baltimore or Boston. They don't want to be in, working at the carpet mill. So this industry, this business, the greatest in the entire planet, and from Dalton, Georgia, that part of the mountains in Northeast Georgia, was about to dry up. So the people are kind of freaked out, and the industry leaders go to Mexico and they recruit workers, and they end up coming to Dalton, Georgia, and they start essentially reinvigorating Dalton, Georgia, and the carpet mill industry. And once again, from its death from its knees, they bring it back up to becoming once again what it was. So I, as a reporter on CNN, took it upon myself, me and my buddy Michael Hurd, my producer, and we said, let's go to Dalton, Georgia. There's a story here, and we got to tell it. So I talked to the Chamber of Commerce. I talked to the guy who owns a dry cleaning business. I talked to the local cops. I talked to the mayor. I talked to everybody. And I said, so what's this been like? They said, well, when we were going through that and all these Latinos and all these people came, we didn't know, and we were scared. And we thought, oh, my God, they're going to destroy our community. It's going to be horrible and blah, blah, blah. So I said, yeah, I can understand. You always fear what you don't understand, what you don't know. So what is it like now? They said, Rick Sanchez, let me tell you something. They pay their bills on time. They come to work 15 minutes early. They leave 15 minutes late. They fill up our churches that were starting to dry up. They have become leaders in our community. They have saved our industries. They're the hardest workers we've ever known. We here in Little Dalton, Georgia, are a microcosm of what actually does work, as opposed to the stories we hear or don't hear from the media. And that captures the essence of what I am talking about. And they happen to be Latinos, but they could have been from anywhere. People with a need and a thirst and a hunger can help America. They don't make it worse. They make us better.
Exactly. And it's and the thing about it is that is an anecdote that I imagine in you could probably go to the meat packing industry and all these other places and repeat that, right? And the thing about it is, why don't we see more of those stories on? Producers have the right to have the power to say, hey, Rick, that story, and that is one story that you don't even run one or two times, right? That is a story that you can, whenever you have that empty space, when there's a news day that is not all, especially in a country when you find that we are having this sort of angst, you can actually run these stories to let people understand.
By the way, you're making me think now. My wife and I were watching Netflix the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Like a bunch of old couples sitting on the couch watching TV. And we said, let's find some new series, and we found some new series. I don't even remember the name of it, but there's a million of them out there. So we're watching this new series, and it's pretty good. And now they cut to a scene in New York, and I think the setting in this series is a restaurant in New York City, right? So they cut to in the restaurant. Now they're taking you into the kitchen. We're seeing the maitre d', we're seeing the chef, we're seeing the people working back there. In this series, produced in Hollywood by a bunch of non-Latinos, all the workers in the kitchen in a restaurant in New York were not Latino. The maitre d' was not Latino. The restaurant workers were not. There were no Latinos in the scene, and I'm thinking, oh my God! I mean, it flies in the face of
reality.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, even where we know they couldn't do it without us, they now make a movie and say, well, let's pretend that the people who are the chefs and the workers and the cooks in a restaurant in New York City are all non-Latinos. And we'll try and sell that to the American people, and the American people apparently buy it because the series is doing great ratings. I turned it off because I said, you're bullshitting us. It just makes me
funny because it brings 2010 right up again, because it just proves that, if we have to keep saying these things in the right way, but we have to keep saying these things because, Rick, I hate to tell you, you've been gone for a long time off of cable news, but there's very little that has actually changed. As MSNBC got a new leader that has put some new folks on in recently, but let's see what happens when ratings make a little dip or something. What's going to happen to those big changes that were made? I much prefer what you decided to do with Agua Media, because when you are in control of your destiny, you are in control of your destiny. So let me ask you, who are our Latino? Before I want to talk a little bit about Agua Media, but before we talk about Agua Media, as you see it, you're the expert. You've been around the block for a long time. Who are our Latino leaders right now?
Well, Latino leaders right now are, first of all, not who we think they are. I mean, AOC is fascinating, and we just did a podcast where we asked that question. why is it that Latinos don't really have a leader per se? And we have some political figures. AOC, for example, she's great. She's fighting hard for injustice and for trans rights and gay rights and racial rights and this right and that right. And it's all good. It's all good. I'm glad she's doing that. But is she really focused, or does she really understand the Latino cause per se? I don't think so. I think she's too busy saving the world to save any one group of people. Then, we have the Ted Cruzes and we have the Marco Rubios. And frankly, between Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Dora, I'll take Dora the Explorer. Because I'm sorry, they're just not there. And you can't be a leader of Latinos in the United States and be a hardcore, or even in Ted Cruz's case, more than Marco Rubio, a right-wing conservative, because right-wing conservatism right now stands for Trump,
white
and Trump stands for anti-Latino.
Right.
So how can you be a Latino leader if you're kind of espousing an ideology that's anti-Latino? So what we're left with then are people like Saul Trujillo, business people who've made a lot of money in their lives and are now wanting to pour it back in to the community and are willing to spend their money to do the research, to find the metrics so that we can then tell the stories that I have been sharing with you, for example, with those numbers. Part of what I just shared with you right now, the best entrepreneurial study in the United States is conducted every year by Stanford University. In fact, it's called the Latino Studies Entrepreneurial Report, put out by Stanford University. Saul and several other, Latino leaders behind the scenes are funding that to make sure that somebody's looking at these things.
Right.
So that it's available for the media. Now it's hard to get the media to pay attention to it, but at least there's the numbers. This is how many we are, and this is exactly what we're doing. So, I would venture to say that, a guy like Saul Trujillo, he's the leader in this community. And like Saul, and here's the other thing the media is getting wrong, is there's a lot of CEOs. There's a lot of business people. There's a lot of doctors. There's a lot of professionals in the Latino community who are really making a difference, and nobody knows about them because they're not being invited to the party.
I'm going to ask you a dangerous question here, because with some Latinos, do you think that some of that could be that they don't express necessarily themselves as Latino and rather be assimilated?
That they don't express themselves as Latinos?
As Latinos. In other words, they want to be of the majority culture. In other words, they look at Latino maybe as limiting, as opposed to being a factor that they themselves should embrace, and not, they don't have to elevate it. It's already there. But let it be seen as the elevated that it is.
When I talk to a lot of the folks in our industry, people like you, right, and me, who bring other cultures to this great country, right? One of the first things we do, and it takes a while to get over it, but the first thing that we have to get over, the first hurdle that we have to get over, that our buddies and our brothers and our sisters who grew up in the United States as quote unquote Americans, Anglo-Europeans or whatever, they don't have to deal with this.
Right.
Is the first thing we need to have to do is change ourselves and become white.
Right.
So when I first got my job as a news presenter or as a journalist, I remember I spent the first 5 years of my life trying to sound like a white reporter.
Right.
Not sounding like Rick Sanchez, who has a soul and a spirit and a Latinism, whatever the hell, or I come from, the barrio and all of those things are great because they make me a unique American. That's really an important part of the melting pot. So whether you're an Asian American or an African American or whatever kind of, American you are, the first thing you should eventually fight through is melting who you are into your message and your ability to speak as an American communicator. And man, you're right. We go through this thing where we think we have to, I call it whitening ourselves up.
Right.
And it's totally unnecessary because that's what makes us special.
And, I run through that a lot. And, it's amazing. I've been kind of going on to TikTok a whole lot and watching a whole lot of Latinos starting to say these kinds of things. No, we all bring something to the table. Lo que queremos es una ensalada. We want a
Exactly.
salad. We don't want to just melt everything into, actually, because you really aren't melting everything into one. You're converting everything into one, right? So there's no real melting pot. There's an ensalada. I mean, I'm from a culture in Panama where we have many subcultures, and I love them all, right? When by the way, I went out to Cuba
which is what makes Panama great. By the way, Cuba's kind of that way too.
Yes,
we're as African as all hell. I mean, we are as European as all hell. We got the Cuban dude with the freckles and the red hair, and then we got the guy who's very dark, from Congo or whatever. It's a complete mix, and that's great.
I was in Cuba about 5 years ago. The best, I mean, we took the whole family. We went like 3 families together, and we just had a ball in Havana, So, I mean, it is like great. So, I mean, I like what you have to say, and I'm so happy that you have Agua Media, where you actually are going to allow that expression. So tell us a little bit about Agua Media.
Well, Saul and I got together. We recently had been really lucky in that my friends here in South Florida and myself started a company. It's called Cano Health. And we built it because they're great doctors. And I know a little bit about branding and marketing and messaging because this is all I've done all my life. And after CNN fired me, we started that. And Egberto, lo and behold, the thing blew up. We worked day and night, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, and it turned into a publicly traded $4.4 billion company.
$4.4 billion?
I thought, well, I can retire and do nothing and sit on a beach somewhere and smoke weed, or I can go back to the thing that I love and work my heart off even more, because I still think there's something missing in this country. And I think that thing is being able to communicate the Latino message. So I got with Saul and we said, let's do this. Let's start something new. The future of communication, especially for young people, is digital. So let's do digital. Let's do Latino. Let's do podcast. And let's get this message out there. So we started this thing called Agua Media. Our key show right now is, Rick Sanchez News. It's a podcast that just tells Latino truths.
Well, wait, let's stop you with don't diminish that. You're an entertaining character. You are always entertaining, and even now that entertainment factor is back. So keep it up, dude. Anyway, Tell me about it.
Thanks. Gracias. Yeah, we do truths. We do the things, like all of a sudden it's vogue in America to say that all Latinos are different. None of us are alike. We're all completely different. We're all going to be voting Republican, or we're going to be, that's not true. Nope. The vast majority of Latinos are family oriented. The vast majority of Latinos go to church and tend to be Christian or Catholic. The vast majority of Latinos vote Democrat. 70% will continue to. I mean, there are patterns within the Latino communities that we all understand and know that haven't changed, but yet somehow the media comes along and says, "Oh, no, they're not monolithic. They're not." Who's speaking that? It's never Latinos.
Exactly.
Here's the other one. They come along and they want to change what we call ourselves. Now, apparently, Latinos are Latinx or something.
Oh, no, man.
You don't get to decide what we call ourselves. I am proud of being a Latino. My grandmother was a Latina, and she would be shaking in her grave right now if she found out that for some reason we're no longer going to just, call her that. That is our culture. We're proud. You're a Panamanian American, Latino Pan American, American. I mean, you could come down the ladder of abstractions in describing people for who they are: Cuban American, Mexican American, Afro-Cuban American. But you can't just throw in a number or a color at someone and say that that's who they are. We're more than a color. So I could go on and on. There's so many things that we discuss and know amongst ourselves, but most Americans don't. And that's why we're telling these Latino truths here on the Rick Sanchez News podcast.
So let me hear it. Agua Media starts with your podcast, and your podcast is going to be I imagine that you already got it on Spotify and all that good stuff.
It's all there. Yeah.
And what else are you going to add to? What else are you going to add? You told me earlier you're going to have some video and etc.
Oh, claro. Yeah, we're already on YouTube. And then, by the way, we have another show That is fantastic. It's Kathy Fernandez, Spiritual Reality. I met Kathy about 3 months ago, and we started talking. And she said, one of the things that Latinos are very spiritual. Latinos we believe in things. We believe in fate. We believe in miracles. We are moved by things. And Kathy and I were talking, and I said, well, let's do a podcast about these things, these spiritual things that Latinos, that we all need to once in a while hear, that make us better, that make us able to cope with things, and that give us the faith and the hope to get through our lives. So Kathy has put together a show. It's a podcast called Kathy Fernandez Spiritual Healing. It's a fantastic show. It debuts in about 2 weeks. In about a week, we debut another show. This is Mario Gongora, un Mexicano, fantastic guy, The Mexicans are just got this spirit of creativity.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm more Mexican than anything else, because how can you live in the United States and not feel that energy? So Mario's putting something called This Really Happened. And This Really Happened is essentially everybody, I don't know about you, Beto, but we all have moments in our lives that happen that were weird. It was like, if I tell people this, they're going to laugh at me and think I'm crazy. But I really was at church one day and I asked God for something. And then suddenly on the way out, a door opened. And I said, who opened that door? And I felt that, and I'm getting goosebumps saying it right now. As Latinos, we all have things that happen in our lives that are bigger than ourselves, and we can't explain them. So this is a podcast about those moments, about those unexplainable things that happen in all of our lives. And what we do is we interview people who've experienced those things, and then we tell it in the podcast. And I think it's cool. So those are the next two big hits we're doing.
It's funny that you said that, because I'm on my 5th book, and I have one called now, Tribulations of an Afro-Latino Caribbean Man. Racism didn't stop my smile, hope, or journey forward. And it is a collection of all those stories that you just told, all the different things that I've had to go through, from corporate America right into small business person and the works. And I love those people like to hear stories because it's real, right?
Yes.
It's not something made up by some Hollywood producer. I think that's why podcasts are doing so well. That's why Agua Media, I learned about it recently, and I said that's why it's going to do well, because the landscape is changing. We are certainly now taking the power away from that centralized person who dictates where news is going to be, or dictates how one is supposed to be educated. Right?
That's absolutely right. And it's owning it. No, you don't get to own it. We own it.
And when I saw this stuff from you, I'm like, Rick, man, I get, I actually, I wanted to make sure that, as I got this report, I said, hey, I wrote to your guy and said, tell Rick, I want this stuff both on Pacifica Network and elsewhere. Talk about this, because I really love seeing it, and really when I saw Agua Media and this, there we go, absolutely so, man.
So let's you know what, I'm going to have my people call your people, as they like to say, because it would be great if we can share some of this and maybe get you on to talk about one of the topics that I think you're
absolutely
hot on too. So let's do it.
Absolutely. But look, let me first say, the last question I always ask everybody is, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
Oh, wow. What would I have liked for you to ask me that you did not ask me? I think you should ask me what I took from being brought down, humiliated, fired, being at the depths of sorrow, as they say, when I lost my gig at CNN, and what I learned from the comeback.
So give me the answer. Because I just asked it. I just asked it in your voice.
Here's what I learned. I learned that we all have skills. Some of them are God-given, and others are those that we conditionally assume after we choose our way in the world. And by getting knocked down to the ground, stripped of my ability to earn a living, because it wasn't just CNN that said, we're not going to hire you or employ you. Every other network then said, sorry, we think you're great. We've seen your tape. My God, you're really good on camera, but No way. You're done. You'll never be on TV again. And after going in the closet and crying in a way that my family wouldn't see me because I was embarrassed to see them and me in that position, one of the things I realized was that I needed to remake myself. And from time to time, we all have to remake ourselves, and it's a healthy thing. And to remake yourself, all you have to do is you dig down deep. You find is what are the qualities inside of you that are transmittable to another industry. And in my case, I found out it was healthcare. Who knew? And I built a $4.4 billion company, and it's actually a little more than I used to make at CNN, to say the least. And the reason I was able to do that was two things, really. What are the skill sets that we all have that we're never actually asked to use because we're comfortable where we are? Mm-hmm. So it's being thrown that level of discomfort that brings it out in us, and which makes us stretch ourselves to become someone else, someone perhaps even bigger than what we used to be. And that was the experience that I had when I found out, okay, I've never done radio per se, but now iHeart's going to give me a gig doing local radio. I'll do it. I've never taught school, but I'm going to go and find a teaching job so I can make extra income. I've never done a show in Spanish, but now I'm going to host a show in Spanish. And I will have 4 jobs, but within those jobs, I will find those skill sets in me that I will then be able to transfer to become the new, perhaps better Rick Sanchez. And I did, and it worked, and I'm better off for it.
Rick Sanchez, an Emmy Award winner who was host of CNN's #1 daytime show. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, hermano.
Igualmente.
Politics Done Right depends on you to keep doing what we do. What do? We make sure to keep, #1, the internet seeded with blogs and information to counter the right and to present what progressives represent for the benefit of us all to everybody, so that it's not misread, misled by any other entity. We make sure and populate that internet with blogs, with videos, with all these other things to make sure that we are informed and to counter everything that you normally hear that are lying at the right. We also make sure to create articles in magazines, articles in newspapers all around the country to ensure, again, that our message gets out there. Last but not least, we also write books. As you see it, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, How to Make America Utopia, are 2 of the many books that I've written on these issues. So please support us in one of many ways. Numero uno, you can support us at PayPal, either one time or monthly. Go to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. You can support us on Patreon. That is politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. Patreon is spelled Patreon. You can support us by becoming a part of our YouTube channel, going to politicsdoneright.com/YouTube, or you can support us in many other forms that you can find at politicsdoneright.com/support. Be sure to visit our store, politicsdoneright.com/store, and get our books at politicsdoneright.com/books.
Economist Larry Summers, supposedly a progressive economist, actually he told the truth, right? He shows, however, why this economic system can only be considered defective, unsustainable, and evil. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side. But please listen keenly. It is very important. Very important.
Let's talk about the economy, the basic economy. You said it's complicated. Complicated could be a euphemism for it's not going to turn around anytime soon.
Look, Andrea, I think we're getting bad news on inflation, and we're getting bad news on economic strength. The bad news on inflation is coming in the form of the wage and price increase data. The bad news on economic strength is coming on terms of the spending data. And so what that's telling us is, frankly, what I and many others have been saying for a long time, that the Fed and to some extent the administration, but much more the Fed's confidence in a soft landing is tooth fairy kind of stuff. And we need, in my view, to prioritize inflation, because if we don't prioritize inflation, we're going to have higher and higher inflation and a more and more stagflationary situation. And we need to prioritize inflation. But if we do, we're going to very likely have a meaningful economic downturn. I was very surprised by Secretary Yellen's expression of optimism that we could somehow get through this without the unemployment rate rising above 5%. She's a great economist, and that's certainly a possibility. But my best guess would be that 5% unemployment sort of corresponds to neutral in the current post-COVID environment. And so to have inflation come way down, we're going to have to see unemployment get above that. So I think we just have to accept what's necessary as part of the investment process for building the very, very strong economy that we can have in the United States.
And so you would assume it's more likely than not we're going to have a recession if we're not already there.
I think the odds are very high, perhaps over 3/4, that in the next year or two we will have a recession, and I think that's just what happens when you have an economy that is as overheated as our economy was allowed to become.
First of all, before I tackle the meat of what he had to say, I want to say this. Notice what he said. In an economy as overheated as it was allowed to occur. In other words, the economy got overheated because we had a pandemic, and we gave people money to stay home. And the money that we gave them to stay home were living wages as opposed to just starvation type incomes many people were getting on their own jobs. And that is a bad thing because that causes the economy to overheat under Larry Summers' parlance. And, based on the way this economic system works, that's true. But then earlier on, he says, Yellen is really talking gibberish because there are bad things that are happening now. And what are the bad things that are happening? Inflation is going up and wages are going up. He didn't say the bad thing is that inflation is going up. He's saying the bad thing that is occurring is inflation is going up and wages are going up. So that's a bad thing. He doesn't look at it and say, oh, that's what we need. We need wages to go up. And he says to solve that problem, the first thing that we have to tackle is inflation. That's the most important thing. Inflation based on our economic system. We need to control inflation. And how do we control inflation? We control inflation by saying we can't be talking about having a 3.5% unemployment rate, or we can't be talking about having a 5% unemployment rate. The people must feel pain. We need to give all those people who are working, we need to throw them out of a job. That is the way we regulate our economic system. Throw them out of a job so that all the rich cats out there, all the rich corporations that are the ones responsible for inflation, can't do it anymore. You see, inflation says those guys who have pricing power, the corporations, they charge whatever they like. And we can't tell them as a society, stop it. Stop ripping us off and stop keeping all of our money in your pockets. Stop being parasites. We can't force them to do that. The only way we can get them to do that is for the feds to come in, the Federal Reserve, to come and coax them that way. And how do you coax them that way? You coax them that way by increasing the interest rates, the Fed rate, increasing the rate so that it costs them more to develop the things to you. And then when you cannot afford all these things, they have to keep their profits going, to keep maximizing their profits. They have to say, okay, what can we cut here? Employment. We cut employment. And when we cut employment, what do we cut? Demand. Because those unemployed people have to be poor now. They can't spend as much anymore. And that's how we stop those plutocrats, the ones with price and power, the ones who increase prices, even though there isn't a supply glut, even though there's not a supply shortage. This guy acts like an overheated economy, meaning an economy where people have money to spend and has to be stopped, even though there isn't shortage of product. The one thing we know, they have money. The people have money now, right? So instead of keeping the products at a reasonable price and making your reasonable profit, and these people can buy more choices, more things, it is no. For the basic things that you need, we're going to increase the prices because we know that if you have the money in your pocket to buy the things of basic needs, you're going to do it, right? And remember, the ones that always get hurt are the ones in the bottom of the scale, because those are the ones that have to buy whatever the market will bear. In other words, I got to go to work, I got to buy gasoline, and it doesn't matter how much of my pocket is taken. The only way those plutocrats stop taking money, the only way the oligarchy, the corporations stop taking money is when stop raising prices, is when they themselves start to feel the pain and starting to lay people off, and then the demand is gone. It's a failed economic system. The lies that you hear about, it's taking people out of poverty and all that kind of crap, it doesn't have to be this system to take people out of poverty. One that says we got to force a certain percentage of our population into poverty so that the plutocrats, so that the rich cats, so that the oligarchy, so that the plutocracy don't keep raising your prices to such an extent that it just gets out of control. Because these guys they don't have a lot upstairs. They just want money. They are parasites. A parasite doesn't understand that after it kills its body, after it kills the body it is parasitic against, it also dies because there is no more body left. But you see, the plutocrats, like I said, they're not very smart upstairs, so they don't mind killing because they know that the system, the self-fixing system of this form of our economic system, of this form of capitalism, going to rein them in before they get themselves killed. Because like any parasite, you kill your victim and then you eventually die. And to prevent the plutocrats from themselves dying, the self-sustaining, just take them to the edge, is the feds, who can then regulate to force them to do the right thing without telling them you can't overcharge the prices. But who always pays, people? You do. Who always? They never pay. You know, they complain about giving us a few $1 billion to get us out of a pandemic, but when they need help, they get trillions in economic easing. They get trillions in quantitative easing. They get trillions in saying we got to make them whole. When the chip manufacturers took their manufacturing overseas, and now there is a supply problem because China can't get the stuff over here quick enough because now it's all the way over there. We're not building these things over here anymore. So we depend on China. We depend on Vietnam. We depend on them sending things here. Our plutocrats, our oligarchy did that to make more money. And then when there's a supply chain problem, which means they can't get the chip to America, they raise the prices on the car. They continue to make a lot of money. And we have to pay the higher prices if we want the stuff, right? And then when the government wants to protect us, right? So because we are the government, we the people. So the government tells Intel and all these other chip manufacturers that send all their chips overseas, all right, we're going to pass the CHIPS Act. We're going to help you build your factories here so that you can employ Americans here and not leave overseas. So they make a big profit to leave, and then we give them our money to beg them to come back to the States. We subsidize the rich guys who made record profits last year. We subsidize them to come. But in order to get this economy working right, we have to go above 5% unemployment. We have to make the average middle class pay. They have got to pay for the mistakes that we make. Oh, it's not a mistake. It's our economic system. Larry Summers' statement on inflation and employment proves we have a defective and unsustainable and an evil economic system. Is he truthful in the way it works? He is truthful in the way it works because it is the system as is. Is there a solution? You bet there is. But you start talking about that solution and you know what people want to call you. So instead, we just continue to pilfer the poor, pilfer the middle class. It is something we can never get above, folks, unless you take command of your economy. We don't need corporations. We need collectives where the owners of that corporations are the people, the means of production, the people who produce. You work for company A, you are part owner of company A because all that profit should go to you and all of you who do it. And for things that are essential to our system, energy, certain types of food, and other areas, healthcare, we the people should be in control of a well-managed system where these guys who work and profit off of our demise can profit no more. Don't forget, folks, support the show at politicsdoneright.com/support. politicsdoneright.com/support. I hope you enjoyed the program, but we got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please.